Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science, only on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavito. I will be your host for today. And of course, today we're going to look at the anti-vaxxers because that is something that is pretty interesting. It's like a movement that's going on. And they have, unfortunately for themselves, recently they've had their butts handed to them in court and also the court of public opinion as their anti-science, anti-vax, I think, anti-disorder, I guess, oppositional defiance disorder has taken over the internet. But with that, we do have some sane people that you're going to be addressing today. Another Dr. Michael Patmos, the star of the show, who is board certified in internal medicine, will give us an up-to-date version of what's going on. Apparently, there's some new developments in the world of the anti-vaxxers. They apparently had some very poor results in court, poor results in the court of public opinion, and ultimately they will be disintegrated. It's just a matter of time. So, what news do we have in those fronts, Dr. Patmos?
Well, good morning, Nick, and good morning to the viewers. Again, thank you for the privilege of being with you. Yes, this is a very big day, and it's actually very exciting because the federal court in Massachusetts, the judge, Judge Brian Murphy, issued a ruling on Monday, on March 16th, that is major. And in this case, the case was brought by 6 medical organizations. It's the American Academy of Pediatrics and others, the American College of Physicians, and so on and so forth. There's basically these medical groups brought a case against Robert Kennedy, Marty Makary, and Jay Bhattacharya, HHS, arguing that the most recent CDC guidelines and recommendations about vaccines are not scientifically based and were done in an arbitrary and capricious manner. And the judge agreed with that and did several things. Number one, he stayed the recommendation, the vaccine recommendations. In other words, the recommendations that came out of CDC that RFK has been promulgating they cannot be implemented. They have been, the judge issued a stay. Not only that, the judge also issued a stay on any of the votes that were conducted by the ACIP committee, the CDC ACIP. That's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. Basically set aside all their votes that they have taken in their various meetings. And then thirdly, the judge said that the appointment of the people to the ACIP, the firing of the experts that were there before, and the appointment of the new, quote, experts, violated the law. And it violated the law for several, and in an arbitrary and capricious way. And it did that in a couple of ways. Number one, they didn't follow the rules for posting the position in the Federal Register and interviewing candidates and so forth. They basically stuck people in there who the judge said were unqualified and lacked experience. The judge even specifically called out every single member of the and the judge said that most of the members of the committee have absolutely no qualifications or experience. But even Dr. Robert Malone, the judge cited as being unqualified and lacking experience. And he specifically said that Dr. Malone's involvement in early mRNA research 30 years ago, which is disputed, the judge even said that research is disputed, and it referenced in the citations an article in the New York Times that went into great detail about Malone's claims that he invented it. It shows that's all disputed. And basically said that Malone is unqualified and lacks the experience, and that this committee was put together illegally. So this is a very important ruling because the ruling sets aside everything that the ACIP, in fact, But he did say that they can meet in the future. I don't think he quite ruled on what should be done about the committee, but it's obvious a committee is configured illegally, and all the actions of the ACIP relative to this matter are arbitrary and capricious, violated the law, and have been set aside. Now, obviously, the defendants in this case, Kennedy, Makari, and Bhattacharya, are going to appeal, and if their appeal if they win on appeal, then it'll end up in the Supreme Court. But they may not win on appeal because it's a very solid decision. I mean, the interesting thing is that the judge actually looked at the qualifications of the individuals on the ACIP and named them specifically as not being qualified. This is very gratifying for me because I've been saying this, for screaming into the void about this very fact for 5 years, that these people are not qualified and that Malone is not qualified. And finally somebody listened. So I'm very gratified by it. I think it's exciting. And it's very confusing for the public because the public has heard all about these vaccine recommendations and now they're stayed. And this includes Malone's recent what he recently said about hepatitis B immunization. They said they're not going to no longer recommending hepatitis B at childbirth. Well, yes, we are. All of the ACIP recommendations have been stayed. That entire committee was appointed illegally and inappropriately. They were not vetted, and they do not have the qualifications and experience. We've got a committee comprised of people who are biased and don't have qualifications and experience, and making judgments about vaccines that they're not qualified to make and putting that out into the public. And guess what? The court said, no, you can't do that, and set it all aside. So this is an very exciting victory for physicians and for public health and for science. And now we need to see what happens as they go forward, because I think if the committee was created illegally and it needs to be disbanded. I think the committee should be disbanded, and they should go about bringing back the people who were there before, who are the experts. So it's not a good day to be Bob Malone. So that's news. And I sent you a copy of the legal matter. I don't know if you saw it in your email, but.
Well, I'll have to read it. I haven't read this. I'll also bring in Rick Rosner, a member of the Mega Society, but I don't know if he's read the case yet. But I'm a little familiar with the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act. You just can't throw people into positions that are not qualified. I mean, that's kind of basic law. You're supposed to go through hearings, and you have to go through certain procedures to get somebody into positions. So it sounds to me what happened is that RFK should know better. He's an environmental lawyer. He should know better than you have to have hearings and vetting and look at qualifications. But
where does this go next? What court? Because they're going to appeal.
Well, I don't know do you know, Dr. Patmos, was the lawsuit filed in federal or state court?
Federal. It's federal court in Massachusetts.
Okay. All right, so it's probably, I haven't read it, but it's probably in the federal district court in Massachusetts. The next appeal will be to probably, I think, the First Circuit Court of Appeals has jurisdiction over Massachusetts. The second is New York. I'm not admitted in any of those courts. I do 9th and 11th Circuit, both sides of the aisle. But the thing is, they'll mark the file for appeal. They'll try to explain to the appellate judges why they can do what they do, but it doesn't sound like they have a really good case. Then if they lose in the appellate court, then it goes to the Supreme Court of the United States, assuming the Supreme Court will listen to it. This is one reason the appellate court is so important, because they only listen to 1 out of 1,000 cases. So I had one case that went to the Supreme Court, and I knew my odds were 1 out of 1,000. I got kind of lucky that they heard it. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to actually hear the case. But the appellate courts generally hear everything. So the thing is, it will probably end up in the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and they'll go through the reasoning. They usually give deference to the trial court. So I did a lot of research in that area when I had cases before the Supreme Court. There are odds on 76% chance, you can look that up, Rick, 76% chance they will lose in the appellate court. but that means they have a 24% chance they'll win. In other words, it's not like it's automatic once they go to appeal. So really depend on what the circuit court judges say. But, I think they have a tough case, especially if they violate the APA, that they're just not going to go anywhere, which means really now, what are the procedures? In other words, what are the recommendations from a group that was convened basically illegally, And that's a good, that's a good question. It's more chaos, and I guess we're going to have to see what the chaos is. I'm looking forward to reading the court opinion, but this also gets me to actually singled out Dr. Malone being not qualified. We've had discussions about him, and I don't know how deep they dug, but I'm sure that the attorneys dug probably very deeply into this person's qualifications, and his qualifications are questionable, So, and then the other people, they may not be qualified at all.
Correct.
Remember, the thing is, what we're seeing, which I've never seen in medicine, they just bring anybody. In other words, I might as well go down the street, bring my buddy who sits at the bar and say, "Hey, would you like to sit on the committee that determines all the medical procedures in the United States?" Oh, sure, but you're not qualified. Doesn't matter. I have the right to point you. So here you come.
Yeah,
it's not that easy.
Basically, what they did, they just went and rounded up, a bunch of doctors who are anti-vaxxers and stuck them on the committee. And like Dr. Milholen, he's from Maui. I was at that same hospital, Maui Memorial Hospital. And he's a pediatric cardiologist. He doesn't have any expertise or training in vaccines. So perfect example of they're putting inappropriate people on the committee. But I just thought it was really, Malone is steaming, hopping mad. He posted on Twitter or X that he's going to sue the judge for defamation.
Okay. That's a little bit of a problem because I guess, obviously, Dr. Malone's not attorney and he's not familiar with immunity. In other words, there's a lot of groups that have immunity, in other words, judicial immunity. So his case won't go anywhere. No attorney will file it because the first thing you're going to say is you can't do that. Why not? Because they have judicial immunity. And there isn't any. It's like suing even the state. Sometimes you actually have to get a waiver to actually sue the state. It's not that easy. So he can blab things out. It just shows how ignorant he is to say, I'm going to go sue the judge. That ain't happening. Did he really say that?
Yes. It's right on X this morning.
Really?
Yep. He said it's a rogue judge, and he asked whether or not he can sue.
He's preaching to a bunch of idiots on X.
Obviously, no. His legal rights are to file an appeal to the federal district court, the circuit court, because he's already probably lost in the district court, and which is the trial court. So that's his only avenue. He doesn't have any avenue. I'm going to sue the attorneys. I'm going to sue the judge. I'm going to sue all the Americans. I mean, he's insane, to even think he can do that. And then the other problem is this. Okay, what would be his cause of action, Dr. Patmos?
He feels that he is he has said he is the world's most knowledgeable expert on messenger RNA. And he feels that by saying he lacks qualifications and expertise, that the court found that's defamation. That they defamed him because they came to the conclusion that he doesn't have qualifications and expertise.
So he's self-anointed as the world's leading expert.
Right.
In other words, there was no other outside organization that determined he was the world's leading expert. Right. And is there any organization that exists that determines any medical professional to be, quote, the world's leading expert?
No. First of all, there's no
that's what I'm saying.
Expert in anything.
It doesn't exist.
I think
it was almost humorous.
I would love to have been in that courtroom. Obviously, reading the judge's decision, there must have been the plaintiff's attorneys must have presented the CVs and the credentials and gone into detail in front of the judge about what these credentials and CVs are. And the judge looked at it and said, these are not qualifications. These are not the correct qualifications.
Yeah.
The judge said he's got qualifications. He just doesn't have the right ones.
Right. Exactly. That's why I say you can have qualifications, but not have the right one for that particular job. I mean, so the thing is, I think he has a medical degree and he has expertise in something, but it's not.
He has 1 year of pathology internship. That's what clinically he has 1 year of pathology internship,
Right.
And he did 1 year of a research fellowship, the Giannini Fellowship in Davis at UC Davis after he did his internship. That's the extent of his graduate medical education, and that's minimal. He's not even board eligible, let alone board certified.
Right, and so he has minimal qualifications in pathology,
Correct.
and that's about it.
So finally, Malone's lack of qualifications has finally gotten into the public space here. It's in a court of law. A court found that he is not qualified. He appears to lack qualifications and expertise. I'm so gratified that a court of law actually said that, because I have been screaming about this for years, and
Right.
I've talked to investigative journalists who are hedging about this, and finally a court of law said nope, he lacks the qualifications and expertise. I love it.
Yeah, didn't he have some of the? Go on, Rick. Yeah.
If you're on the West Coast, you may be able to take a vacation from getting vaxxed for the next few months for flu and for COVID, even if you're a reasonable person who gets vaxxed, because for the first year since COVID came, there was no winter spike in COVID, and the circulating levels of COVID virus in sewage are 1/10 what they were in previous years. So we might have a really easy summer where you might be able to put off. And also, we're on the downslope of the winter spike in flu. So if you didn't get vaxxed like you should have in September, October, you can probably wait till September or October to catch it, to get the new vax for the predicted. Well, one thing that this committee did, was that they became very bad at predicting what the flu was going to be, because a bunch of idiots were put on the prediction committee, I guess, whatever you call it. Maybe this court ruling will mean that we'll get better flu vaccine in September. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, Moderna was on the way to developing a better flu vaccine, and it got stopped. FDA stopped their research. So there's just this anti-mRNA mindset, which ultimately comes from Malone. He's the one who's driving the anti-mRNA. He was the first guy to come out and really say that messenger RNA vaccines are bad and we shouldn't have them. I know because I invented them. This is what he's been saying since 2021. And finally, somebody's actually calling him out for not having the expertise that he claims he has. So make no mistake, when you hear anti-mRNA, whether it's the flu vaccine or COVID vaccine or any other mRNA-based vaccine, the opposition to it is ultimately coming from what has been said by Robert Malone, because he has created, by self-anointing himself as an expert, the appearance that he is the authority because he invented it. This is what he says. And so he's held out as the expert. Well, court just said, don't think so.
Yeah, mRNA vaccines are good, and they offer the possibility of personalized vaccines. This guy, it was just in the news, his dog has cancer. A lay guy, not a scientist, not anything, just a guy who goes on the internet. He went on the internet and fooled around with AI and ran his dog's genome and the cancer gene. And then he worked with some people he got for his dog for, probably $6,000. He got a personalized vaccine against the dog's tumors, and they shrunk the dog's tumors and bought the dog more time. So we're on the verge of a huge, huge steps forward in personalized cancer treatment, except that under Trump, like 91% of the research, the National Cancer Institute, I think, got its funding cut by 91%, some crazy amount. So we're falling behind the rest of the world. But once we get the crazy people out of government, we're looking at great strides.
You know, there's a reason why the mRNA vaccine won the Nobel Prize. That's the biggest prize in science. And Dr. Carrico and Dr. Weissman from the University of Pennsylvania won the Nobel Prize for the mRNA vaccine. That platform is not just for the COVID vaccine, which saved millions of lives, but for other vaccines as well, and even cancer treatment and other kinds of treatment. And for one man to put a stop to it out of jealousy is just unthinkable. And that's really what it boils down to. Malone feels in his mind that he's responsible for this technology and he didn't get the credit for it. He has said he was written out of the history, and he's very aggrieved that he did not get the credit he feels he deserves, going all the way back to 1989. The paper that he wrote, he was a student at the time and he got to write a paper, but the research that he was doing was at the behest of his mentor, his professor, Dr. Verma and Dr. Felgner. Malone was the student in the lab. He did the pipetting. He carried out the steps at the laboratory bench, mixing this and pouring that and pipetting this and doing that. That's the steps that he did. So no question he was involved there, but it wasn't his idea. The idea came from Felgner and Verma, but Malone was smart enough to recognize that this was a big deal, that you could put RNA into cells, you could transfect RNA. He realized it was important, so he wanted to take credit for it. He even put his name on a patent. Of course, they caught him and they crossed his name out, and his name ended up last on the patent instead of first. But that's the reason why he got booted out of his PhD program, is because he tried to take. So he's been trying to take credit for this for over 30 years. In his mind, he's responsible for it. He did contribute. I mean, he did the pipetting and he tweaked the process. But the idea, the original idea, was not his. It was Dr. Verma and Dr. Felgner.
Yeah, and why don't we hear about Dr. Verma and Felgner? Why do we hear about this Malone guy when Malone is not really somebody you want to hear from?
Well, Verma's long gone. He was, an older man 30 years ago. He was Dr. Inder Verma was a giant of research at the Salk Institute at UC San Diego 30, 40 years ago. He had hundreds of papers, multiple grants, and a big lab with all kinds of research fellows and doctoral candidates. Malone was one of them, working in his lab. He had all kinds of research grants. That research was all funded by Verma's grant money. And he had lots of articles about DNA and RNA. This is what he was researching. Dr. Felgner is younger than Dr. Verma. He already had his PhD back then, and he was working at Syntex, which is a company in Palo Alto. And Felgner developed lipofectin, which is that soapy substance that's used to transfect DNA and RNA. And he wrote a paper in 1987, 2 years before Malone even showed up in the lab as a student. He wrote a paper saying that he transfected DNA, and he said, and I'll bet you could use this same process to transfect RNA and even oligonucleotides. That was Felgner's work. Well, along comes Malone into the lab, and he picks up their idea and he conducts their research. He even referred to it as Felgner's research in a letter that he wrote to Dr. Felgner, where he said, I'm doing your research. Malone even acknowledged it wasn't his research.
Okay. But it sounds to me he wants the credit, even though it's not.
Yes.
So and because in any group of people, in scientists and doctors, I've worked with writers, anytime you have a team of writers, like 1/3 are going to be above average, 1/3 are going to be average, 1/3 are going to be below. And if you have a big enough group, somebody's going to be a frickin' jerk. And in this group of researchers, Malone is the jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so he goes from I invented all this to a judge saying he's not qualified.
Right. Yeah.
That's
But
great.
here's the exciting thing about mRNA. It's like if you're a home handyman, you've got that set of wrenches, right, of every size, and you grab the nut with what until you find the one that fits. So with cancer, every cancer cell, and you can tell me if I'm off here, has a different outside shape. And you want to train your body to know what the cancer is shaped like and have a grabber that when it feels it, the immune cells grab it and engulf it and destroy it. And recently, in the last year or so, they've used AI working to simulate the folding of protein, which is what you need to get the grabbers, the wrenches, and they've come up with a complete toolkit for every possible grabber. So now, if you've got a cancer, they could run the shape of the cancer and look in the toolkit and build you genetic instructions to immunize against the specific shape of the bad cells that are going crazy in you. And this.
Yes, absolutely. It's highly specialized and very specific. And that's why the mRNA vaccine is so important and why it won the Nobel Prize. And that's also why it is so incredibly damaging, that because of Malone and the others he has influenced, the public perception now, if you talk to the average person on the street, you mentioned mRNA, most people are terrified of mRNA vaccines. They've gotten this false idea that mRNA vaccines are bad because people like Malone and McCullough and these others who are constantly putting out information about mRNA vaccines, basically. So what they're doing is they're denying the world and scientific advance. An important advancement in science and public health is being denied to the world by these people who have this delusional perspective and who ultimately all point back to Malone, and because of his bitterness of feeling that he's been written out of the history and didn't get the credit. I wonder if he had gotten the credit, if they had given him the Nobel Prize, I'm sure he'd be a big proponent of mRNA. It's only because he didn't get the Nobel Prize. Of course, he's not even a candidate for it because his role was minimal.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it was like
a lot of money from his denial. Like a lot of the vax deniers, like they sell their own bullshit products. Is he part of that?
No, he doesn't. I don't think he sells products. McCullough sells product. He's anti-mRNA, anti-vaccine. He's got a whole line of wellness products, and he's got all kinds of supplements and herbs, and all kinds of goofy stuff. If you go to the wellness, and they'll sell you emergency medical kits that you can get by you contact them and they send you a kit and it's got amoxicillin and azithromycin and steroids and inhalers just in case there's a pandemic. And so they're selling people all these antibiotics. I mean, you talk about inappropriate antibiotic prescribing. They're just putting out antibiotics, multiple antibiotics for people to buy on the internet for use if you think you need them. Well, that's totally inappropriate.
So is Dr. Malone just doing it because he has a grudge because he was just a clerk and he thought he was the inventor? So is that it?
Yeah, he was a student.
What's his motive?
What's his motive?
Yeah.
I think the guy, he really wanted the fame. He wanted to be the next Jonas Salk. And I think when he worked in that lab, when he was a student, he's a smart guy. There's no question about it. He's a very intelligent man. He saw and he recognized the potential for our mRNA way back then. I mean, you think about it, this is revolutionary. If you could, what Feldner had come up with, the idea that you could take a nucleic acid like DNA and RNA and attach it to a soapy bubble and put it into a cell and it gets incorporated into the cell and then the cell acts on it and produces proteins based on it. That is a big deal. And Malone recognized that was a big deal and he wanted to get his name on it. But the reality is it wasn't his idea.
So what we've seen with the tech billionaires, and this guy is, you can be a smart stupid. And Elon Musk, where we used to think that that if you were smart in a genius in one area, then you were a genius in every other area. Like Einstein. Einstein, very smart in physics, also a pretty good guy. But we've seen, mostly in the COVID era, that just because you're smart enough to make $20 billion doesn't mean that you're not an idiot and a jerk in your personal life.
That I would agree. And we're out of time, so we want to thank Dr. Michael Patmos for bringing up to date with what's going on in the world of the anti-vaxxers. And we'll see you next time on Medicine Science on the Pod TV Network. Until then, have a good day.